This episode is brought to you by Indeed. Stop waiting around for the perfect candidate. Instead, use Indeed sponsored jobs to find the right people with the right skills fast. It's a simple way to make sure your listing is the first candidates see. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs have 4 times more applicants than non-sponsored jobs. So go build your dream team today with Indeed. Get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
Hi, it's Charlie McAvoy from the Boston Bruins.
Charlie McAvoy wins it in overtime.
Watch as we take on the Tampa Bay Lightning in the 2026 NHL Stadium Series in Tampa. Catch all the action on Sunday, February 1st on ESPN. Visit NHL.com/Stadium Series for tickets and more information. That's NHL.com/Stadium Series. See you February 1st. The NHL Stadium Series is coming to the Sunshine State.
Oh, it's such a clutch off-season pickup, Dave.
I was worried we'd bring back the same team.
I meant those blackout motorized shades.
Blinds.com made it crazy affordable to replace our old blinds.
Hard to install?
No, it's easy. I installed these and then got some from my mom. She talked to a design consultant for free and scheduled a professional measure and install.
Hall of Fame son.
They're the #1 online retailer of custom window coverings in the world.
Blinds.com is the GOAT.
Shop up to 40% off site-wide, plus an extra 10% off every order and a free professional measure happening right now at Blinds.com.
Hello everyone and welcome to How Are the Podcast. It's Gav and you join us for a news roundup. We've threatened we'd do these a little bit more often, and because Régis Le Bris has spoken to the media this week ahead of the Burnley game, and there's a couple of other little stories that we haven't covered off this week, I thought it would be a nice time to do one. So, joining me first today, we've got Johnny Hawley. Hello, mate.
All right, Gav. Back
Yeah.
again, chatting some more Sunderland news. Might even get a bit of transfer talk in this one, just like the
Yeah.
old days.
Yeah, absolutely. And also with us is Bomber. Hello, mate.
Hello, mate. Hello, Johnny. It seems to be me and Johnny ever present on these news ones the last few weeks.
You're the go-to men when it comes to news. That's what it is.
We're the most freely available, you mean?
Yeah, we're the only suckers who'll sit and talk about Le Bris and not answering questions for half an hour.
Well, we might as well dive straight into the press conference, really. I did say to you two before I came on, normally these are a bit of a non-event. He doesn't like to give much away. I mean, if anybody listened to the one before this, before we played West Ham, it was just him basically not answering questions. So he was a little bit more open today when he spoke to the press earlier today. But yes, I think he gave us a couple of hints of things of what to come. So I thought it was worth diving into. The big one off the top was about Granit Xhaka. He was asked immediately, "How's he doing? You know, are things going well?" And he said, "Yeah, he's doing well. He'll have another assessment in a week or so. Then we'll see where he's at with his rehab. But they are aiming for around 3 weeks." Good news, Johnny, or like what do you feel when you hear that?
Well, it's not good because it does still mean that we're without Xhaka for a few games. But all things being equal, like that could be a lot worse. You know, he's not out for the season. He's, by the sounds of it, it's not some sort of like, you know, really serious injury where there'd be big risks of a reoccurrence or rushing him back too quickly sort of thing. So it's positive in the sense that it sounds like it's nothing too serious of an underlying problem. So hopefully he is back, you know, according to the timescale. And to be honest, even the fact that they've given us this amount of detail tells you that I think they've realised that people possibly do need the minds put at rest a little bit, because how many times have we sat even on here and said, "Oh, well, the club have said 6 to 8 weeks, so that means we'll see them in about 6 months." I think if people were feeling that way about Jackie, you'd get a bit of anxiety. So, yeah, fingers crossed we see him back soon.
Yeah, it was the rumours when they first came about Bomber were 6 weeks. So, like, I can kind of deal with this. It's not nice. Like, we don't want to be without Granit Xhaka, but you know, at least he's on the right track. You know, you've got to think we probably have burned him into the ground a little bit recently, given that he's played virtually every minute of every game. And
Well, yeah, I
played
think,
like all 120 odd minutes against Everton and things like that when he was apparently carrying an injury. So, like, yeah, it could be worse, I suppose, couldn't it?
It could be. I think, and you're right, he's probably, outside of Robin Roos, has probably played the most football. I think me you, Johnny, and Chris were on a couple of weeks ago where we were talking about something similar. I think he's only missed like 17 minutes of football this season, which, for somebody who is in the centre midfield and, has covered the second or third highest amount of kilometres in the Premier League out of anybody. So the fact that he has come in and been able to play so much and put so much energy in, it's probably inevitable that we're going to lose him at some point for a couple of weeks. I'm just glad that it's happened now and not, at the start of December when we also were going to be without Siddiqui, Diarra, etc. And obviously that Christmas and New Year schedule, as it happens, he's going to at worst probably miss 4 games, maybe. I can't remember when the FA Cup game is, but he might miss 4 games. Whereas if it was in December and we're talking 4 weeks, he's probably missing 6 or 7, and 6 or 7 really important games for us as well. So if you think about the Man City game in particular, without Granit Xhaka, I don't think we draw that game. We don't take anything from that home game on New Year's Day. So yeah, it's a big blow, but if we were going to lose him, it's probably come at the right time, I think, other than last 4 weeks of the season when we're already safe, perhaps. But that's speculative, isn't it? That's speculation. But the good thing is that there's players that can come in and, like Le Bris said in his press conference, not replace him because you cannot replace Granit Xhaka. But there are good players to come in that means that we're not as weak as we would be ordinarily without Granit Xhaka in that team.
Yeah, and then he moved on, Johnny, to talking about transfers, and obviously typical Régis, bit non-committal on those sort of things. But I don't know about you lads, but he did feel a little bit more relaxed on transfers. And while he didn't commit to saying we're going to sign somebody, because that would just be daft, of course, if you're reading around what he said, and he said the market's often like this. He can't really comment on individuals, but he's had many conversations. There's not many deals at the minute going on. As a club, we don't need to rush, as we're happy with the squad, which is something I've said a few times this week to people. I think we've done really well. And worst case scenario, we don't bring somebody and it's not the end of the world. But he did say, if we can reinforce, we will try. Work's going on behind the scenes and we're better off staying under the radar and we'll see what happens. And that just made me... Well, it made the hairs prick up a little bit on my neck. And then he added to that, he said, it's possible something might happen. The market's unpredictable. The end of the market is often more active. So if you're reading around that, Johnny, that's basically him saying, I'm not making any promises here, but we might still sign 1 or 2.
Well, he must be the most relaxed manager in the Premier League at the minute because, you see the absolute chaos that's happening it's what feels like every single other club in the league. Crystal Palace, everything that's going on there. You've had big moves at Man City. You can go right through the league, can't you? And there's been stories up and down. And all of those deals basically feel like they involve a lot of panic from one or both clubs involved in the deals. And we're essentially sitting on the outside looking in and kind of just laughing to ourselves. We're actually all right over here. If, like you say, if we get nobody, then it's not a disaster, is it? Like, if you could go back in time and tell us before the summer started what our squad would be, and it's this squad, and you'd say, that's going to be the squad at the end of January when the window closes. We'd all be absolutely over the moon, wouldn't we? I know we've said that a lot already about the summer business. If you could have said we'd sign all these players, but if you'd said, that's what we'll have by the end of January, you'd already be happy. If you then say, and actually you signed all of those players in the summer, so you've had them the whole season as well. You know what I mean? It's not a negative if we don't add more to a squad that's already good enough, because I think, you've mentioned it a few times. It's a bit of a cliche about transfers in the January window. It's like, if you need to sign players now, you've done something wrong, and we haven't done anything wrong. So I'm sure Le Bris is completely relaxed. I thought even before the West Ham game, but certainly one of his previous press conferences, he had a very similar tone again. Like, he was, almost a little knowing wink and a little smirk from him, or as close as you'll ever get to that from Le Bris. I don't know if his face is capable of those expressions, but he's clearly happy. So yeah, I agree. I think he's not so much hinting that we'll sign someone, but I think he's certainly just giving us a little a little bit of a, don't worry, lads, we're not daft. We're on the lookout, and if it comes up, we'll move. But yeah, it must be a lovely position to be in, mustn't it? Because
Yeah.
if you're Oliver Glasner looking over at Régis Le Bris right now, you're like, God, I'd change places with him.
Yeah, we are in a fortunate position, Bomber, aren't we? We've had such a good summer window that we've made the job this January pretty easy. And if you look at the business in the window that's been done by other Premier League clubs, the big money is being spent either by, Man City, who I think realised they need to bridge the gap between them and Arsenal by signing players, and they've had problems in defence. They've gone out and signed a centre half, and they've got a winger, and spent an awful lot of money to do that because they're competing at the top of the table. Then right down the bottom, you've got the strugglers all going out and spending money and bringing in big loans. You've had West Ham spending 50 odd million on 2 strikers, I think. Wolves have basically gave up and started cashing in on players. Forest are trading. Leeds are trying their arm. Palace, who aren't out the woods yet, really. Palace are obviously losing players, but also trying to bring players in because of that. So, it's right, isn't it? When you've done a bad job in the summer, you have to try and put things right in January, but we're not in that position. And I think the language used by Régis Le Bris when he talks about operating under the radar, the market being unpredictable, the market often being more active at the back end of it, that's put us in a really fortunate position. And actually, we can sit here and go, agents and clubs can't take the piss out of us, because if we don't actually sign anybody else, we'll be absolutely fine. And when you're going into negotiations with players who you might fancy, if the deals are ridiculous, if the players are asking for too much money, or the selling clubs are asking for too much money, or if the loan fees are ridiculous, we can just say no. So I think that's why he's being open-minded, because either we're not, the options are, we're either teams are going to try and take the piss and we won't have it, or something's going to come up at last minute that just suits us and we'll go, yeah, we'll have that.
Yeah, and it's a nice position to be in, isn't it? And how long has it been since we've been a club that other clubs haven't been able to take the piss out of? It happened for a long, long time, and we're almost an unrecognisable club now, and it's so refreshing as a fan to look at. And yeah, okay, we accept that at some point we will lose our best players, but it's going to be because the deal suits us, not because of bad management in the upper echelons of the club. And conversely, players coming in, it's not going to be throw tens of millions of pounds at somebody willy-nilly because an agent has spoken really highly of them and the club are desperate to bring somebody in. Every single transfer that we've made, you could argue possibly not Masuaku, that's one that kind of has fallen by the wayside a little bit and hasn't really worked out. But if you think of all the players that we brought in, if he's the only one that hasn't really worked out, we've done all right. And like you suggested, Gav, our summer business evidently has been so good that the pressure's completely off. And like you say, the only teams that are doing anything are, one, splashing out massive amounts of cash, paying over the odds for players because they have to, because there is an expectation for them to either stay in the league or to challenge for the league. Like you said, Man City signed Gahey and Semenyo to help with their title charge, because there is an expectation that they, from fans and pundits and everyone else, that they will challenge, if not win the league. And then there's an expectation from the likes of West Ham fans and perhaps not Wolves fans. Wolves fans, like you say, have seemed to have resigned themselves to the Championship, and the board of directors and the owners are cashing in whilst they're still Premier League players. But yeah, you're right. That kind of core group that's, I don't know, 8th through to 14th are kind of sitting pretty at the minute, going, we'll just pick and choose our transfers that suit us. And we will do the same. And I'm the same as Johnny. Like if the window closes on Tuesday or Monday, whenever it is, and we haven't signed anybody, as long as we don't lose, Mayenda and Isidore and don't replace them with anything, if our squad is the same as it is now, come Monday, Tuesday, I'm not bothered. I still think we'll be absolutely fine. I still think that we've got a good chance of challenging for, a 7th, 8th place finish and possibly European football. I certainly don't think our squad standing still, so to speak, this January is going to harm our chances of we're not going to go down, but of finishing in the bottom half of that league table, I'm completely, for the first time ever, I think, I'm completely relaxed about it. And I like you, I'm quite encouraged by, well, Regis's first comment was, I won't comment on individual players when I asked the question about transfers, which means that there are irons in the fire and there are deals to be done, but he will not be mentioning names. And that's all the confidence. That's everything that I need, really, to give me the confidence that if they happen, they'll be great and I'll get excited about them. If they don't, this team is pretty damn good as it is.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. We'll wait and see. Maybe we will be doing another news pod between now and the transfer window closing, Johnny. But he did talk a little bit about outgoings. He was asked if there's a likelihood of anybody leaving, and he was straight up. He said, "Yeah, still possible. More will leave. There are one or two players who probably need to go and play. Is there any more minutes?" Immediately springing to mind, who is there really? I know. Do we even include Pavetta? Would anyone take him? Pavetta, Bar. But I mean, in terms of the actual squad, like players who make the bench and they don't have a realistic chance of playing. Are we talking Helder maybe? Harrison Jones if he's fit? I don't know if he's injured or not. I mean, there are still a couple, aren't there? I mean, we'll get into the ones who've already left in a bit, but yeah, I think the squad's pretty much in the spot I'd like to see it in. Maybe missing one or two players, but in terms of outgoings. Yeah, is there anyone who springs to mind for you?
No,
maybe?
Yeah, I suppose Patterson's the one, isn't he? Like we've had links to the keeper from the German league?
Yeah.
Which I think he's gone somewhere else now, hasn't he? But that suggests that there's probably movement in that position on the club's mind, and you've got to think that if we're going to bring someone in, it's because Patterson's going to leave. So yeah, he obviously he needs to play football. I don't think any Sunderland fan would begrudge him an opportunity to go and be a number one again and to prove himself because, he's played, I kind of remember whether he's hit 200 appearances for Sunderland or not, but he's played a lot of football for us and he's been part of some big moments and promotions. So, if he's going to go, then fair enough. I hope he just gets a good opportunity. Similar to Dan Neil, really. They're the kind of players that you think, the club just needs to do what's right by them, really. The other lads, yeah, Pavetta, Bar, Helder, I mean, essentially anyone who is only making the matchday squads when we've got a massive amount of injuries or suspensions or players at AFCON, those are the lads who you're thinking, well, if you're only just about scraping the bench when we don't, like when we're missing half a team, then you're probably not needed. So they can obviously go off, just knocking me desk over as I speak. But in terms of like players who need to play, selfishly from our point of view, there aren't really many. Like there's not a load of players who are hanging around the squad that we want to develop that aren't getting, at least some game time and getting involved, whether that's off the bench, whether that's starting games. You think in Mayenda, you think Chris Rigg, players like that who are obviously really talented, loads of potential, but just, not quite at the level where they can start every week. But they're playing a lot of football, which means they do have a place in the squad. So I don't really want to see any of the genuine options that we've got go out. So yeah, I'm with you. I think it's going to be sort of the bomb squad, the forgotten men who are going to be leaving. And if anyone senior is going to go, it probably means that there's an incoming on the way because we wouldn't leave ourselves short.
Yeah, I don't know about you, Bomber, but that departure of Dan Neil, while he wasn't really seen as an important player this season, he was making the bench. He was a captain last year. Would it be fair to say if we were being really picky? I know a lot of people want to say a right winger come in, but do we need to replace him maybe in the squad? Because let's say there are one or two injuries, then we probably are a little bit short. But it's difficult, isn't it? Because you're letting players go out the door, yeah, but you want to bring in strong players, but if they're not available, and there's nothing you can do about it really. So I know I just mentioned to Johnny there about the players who could potentially go, but I don't think other than the ones who've gone already, there's really anyone that stands out where we would go, they're going to be a big miss if we lose them. So, where do you see that position in particular, centre mid?
I think it is a funny one because Dan Neil, he made what? He's made what, 2-3 appearances off the bench for the last 10 minutes of games or so. So objectively, you look at that and you think, oh, it's not going to be that big a miss. But then all of a sudden, Dan Neil's gone and Xhaka's gone for at least a few weeks. And you then have what in that centre midfield? You have your starting midfield is probably going to be Diarra, Siddiqui, and Lefay. And then past that, you've got Geertruida, who we don't really know. We know he can play there. We don't know how Reggie sees him. He's tried Trey Hume in there. All of a sudden, it looks like we're a little bit light of specialist centre midfielders, I guess, in the Dan Neil mould. Now, I think if we were to bring somebody in that is going to be Dan Neil and play 2 games between now and the rest of the season, I don't think that sort of player is possibly out there. It does feel that we're one injury away from being very, very light in there, or one suspension away from being very light in there. Light's probably not the right word, but in terms of it being noticeably detrimental to our ability and to our start, the performance of that midfield 3, because you take Siddiqui out and replace him with Geertruida, let's say, there isn't really anything else behind that. So I would probably like to see one come in. I'm not that bothered about right wing, to be fair. We've got enough players that can play on either side, and you also throw into the mix the likes of Chris Rigg, who's been used out there. Trey Hume's also been used out there on the right wing. I'm not that fussed because we tend to win our games and we tend to stay in games due to the power and the performances of that centre midfield. So if it was going to be that we were only strengthening one area, I'd want to see it be centre midfield, and not even just because Dan Neil's gone, just because, I think that is the most important part of the pitch for us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And he was talking about this in the press conference, Johnny. At least he was asked a lot about sort of the way we're going to cope without Granit Xhaka and the way we set up and things like that. And Nick Barnes specifically mentioned to Reggie about Habib Diarra coming on the right-hand side when he's came on in the last couple of appearances. And while he's not going to sit and tell you exactly how we're going to play, he kept repeating this thing about we're going to find a new system. We need to find a new system. And obviously that was evident at West Ham. We tried something completely different. We went with the middle 2 of Enzo and Noah Siddiqui, and it didn't work. But I've been stewing on this all week, and I just kind of peek behind the curtain time. I spoke to Nick through the week, and I was like trying to get him to ask that question about Diarra, because that's something I was really interested in, because it's been nagging away at me that he has been coming on the right, and maybe when we're talking about Sunderland needing another option on the right-hand side of the pitch, whether what we're about to see is a system change in which he is that right-sided player in the same way Hume has been in the last few games, in the same way Rigg was when Rigg came into the team when AFCON started. He seems to like this sort of lopsided 4-4-2 where your width comes from Nordy. You have a player on the right side of the pitch who in possession plays as a right midfielder and kind of feeds Nordy to an extent, and also gets down the channels and wins headers and things. But then out of possession, and Reggie's talked about this, about being out of possession and being able to drop Trey Hume into a 5, and he sees that as a real strength of the team. I just see this as, I can't get it out of my head that I think that's where Diarra's going to end up. I've got this feeling he's going to be probably playing on that side of the pitch, at least in the next couple of games, and maybe that's lessened the desire from within the club to recruit a right winger. I could be totally wrong. I just can't shake this feeling.
Well, it's a really, really interesting problem that we've got to solve. What we do with the kind of the structure of that midfield in particular, obviously with Xhaka being out. And I totally agree with you. I think, we were exposed badly at West Ham, obviously partly just because Xhaka's class and he wasn't on the pitch, but also because, like you say, that pairing of Enzo and Siddiqui just didn't work. They weren't able to, cover for each other when they needed to. If they were covering for each other, it limited them going forward. So there was a little bit too much kind of give and take in terms of like trying to still balance, going forward and defending while accommodating such a big hole in the middle of the pitch. So yeah, I think Diarra, it's an interesting one because he's obviously going to be in the team, right? Like he's clearly one of our best options in the midfield. And when you've lost Xhaka and you've got Diarra to plug in, it's a no-brainer. As to whether he'll end up playing on the right, I can see it happening. I just wonder whether that's something that might have to be in the medium term, because again, like going back to West Ham,
certainly till Xhaka reappears, we're going to have to try something different.
Yeah, exactly, right. That's what I was trying to get at. Like, you look at the West Ham game, that problem needs fixing now. Like that we need to have put something in place for that for the Burnley game. But then going forward, I do think it makes a lot of sense, because Siddiqui has played his best football when he's been on the left-hand side of the midfield, like still centrally, but he was striking up a really nice relationship with Ronaldo. And then with Enzo or, whoever was playing on the left at times, we were having some lovely little triangles that were developing. They seem to have great, connections and dynamics off the ball. They seem to be able to dovetail really nicely. So I think it makes total sense to leave that left-hand side of the pitch by and large as it is. On the right-hand side is where we've obviously seen loads of chopping and changing. And Hume's done a brilliant job when he's been called on to play in all these kind of hybrid positions and fulfill all these different roles that, that are much more unique than anything that he would have been asked to do previously in his career. But I think Diarra's game does suit it a bit better. And we saw a glimpse of that with the goal against West Ham, where, Diarra on that sort of right-hand half of the pitch picks up the ball, he drives forward, he plays a tell-and pass inside into a, that kind of breaks a line and helps get us into a more dangerous position. That's part of his game. We saw early on in the season that he's able to get on the ball and turn, and he's able to, operate kind of between the midfield and the attack. He's able to move you up the pitch like that, as well as then obviously his amazing work rate off the ball. So I do think that absolutely is not just a viable option. I think that's a really good option that we've got, because then it allows us to be a little bit more creative with how we set up our forward line, because you kind of steal half a player by getting Diarra into that role, because he's still going to be able to get back and cover in the midfield, but he's able to contribute going a bit further forward as well. So it's going to be really interesting to see it play out. I do think that's a really good idea. But I do think that, in the short term, it's going to have to be something a little bit more, not basic, because Le Bris's systems and formations are all miles above my head. I wouldn't be able to call any of them basic, but I think we'll see something a bit more orthodox, shall we say, in the short term. But that's definitely something that I think Le Bris will want to explore, because as we've seen with Hume, he's more than open to these kind of, almost horses for courses roles in his system, where it can adapt based on the skill set of whoever's playing in that role. And Diarra's got a lot of tools in his locker. Diarra, I think we underrate his ability on the ball sometimes because of his engine, but very good footballer.
Yeah, they played that lovely ball for Mukiele in the build up to the goal that we scored at West Ham as well. So maybe that's a hint of where things are going. We don't know. The rest of the press conference, there were bits I would pick out, but nothing too notable other than a couple of little things. Talked about how Xhaka wants to help create new leaders as a result of him being out of the team, and that featuring quite heavily. So there's been a bit of a call this week within the squad for people to step up and take ownership, and maybe that was to our detriment at West Ham, but Reggie said, actually, sometimes you have to have negative experiences to get you right on the right path, and maybe that will help to breed new leadership from within the group. And the other thing I wanted to quickly touch on before we go to the break, Bomber, was when he was asked about deadline day ending just before we play Burnley. He was nonplussed, really. He said, "Not my job." He might as well have just said, "That's not my job. I'm not bothered." Yeah. He said his main focus was the squad. We've got Florent, Gasolfi, Christian Speakman, Kirill all working in the background to get deals done and work on getting players out. But his focus is totally on the game. I think that's what makes him quite unique for us, is that, there are still a lot of coaches out there and a lot of managers out there who do want the ultimate say on transfers, on deals, they want to have their fingers in every single pie in the club. You don't have to look far, really. Eddie Howe's like that at Newcastle. I think Glasner at Palace has been pretty outspoken in recent weeks. He was outspoken after we beat them because of all this sort of thing. He doesn't seem to be too fussed, does he? He's somebody who seems to just relish working with what he's got. He's got a strong group and he's like, well, if I can add to it, great, but whatever. But ultimately, he's a coach first and foremost, isn't he? Which is maybe why these press conferences aren't as revealing as the press would probably like them to be. They would like him to speak a little bit more openly, but I don't think he sees the need to. He sees his role very much as the man who deals with the important stuff, the footy.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I was going to say. He epitomizes the head coach role, doesn't he? Role, where here are your players, get the best out of them. Your job is solely week on week to pick us up points, to move us up the league, to keep us safe in the Premier League, to go on and be successful in seasons to come. And he fully embraces that, and he understands that's his remit. And there is absolutely no chance that he will have had no say on in terms of who he fancies, what positions he feels he needs to strengthen, because between him and his data team and his coaching team, they will see it day in, day out and know where we could do with strengthening, or know where his ideas, in order for his ideas to come to fruition, we need this sort of player or someone with a little bit more of this or a little bit more of that. And I'm pretty sure those conversations will have already happened. And 2-3 weeks ago was probably the final time Le Bris talked with Kirill and the likes about who he wants to bring in. And they probably agreed a series of 6 or 7 names and a few contingencies. And he said, yeah, if you get me any of those, or if this player goes one of these two, I'm absolutely fine with that. And they've gone, yeah, okay, brilliant. Thanks, Régis. You go ahead and you look at trying to get results against West Ham, against Burnley, against Liverpool, etc., etc. And he's absolutely right. Until all this speculation about, well, there hasn't been that much speculation, but any speculation about, this player's coming in and this player's coming in or this player's coming in, shouldn't matter to him whatsoever, because until they're putting on a Sunderland training top and turning up at the Academy of Light, nothing to do with him whatsoever. There's no point in planning for a match or preparing for a match on the event that a player may or may not still be here at the time at which the match is taking place, or whether a new player comes in or doesn't before the next match comes along. He just has to prepare and say, right, this is the squad that I've got. I'm going to anticipate that this is the squad that I've got. And even if we did sign somebody over the weekend, they're not going to be involved for the Burnley game anyway. So it's of no bother to him whatsoever, and nor should it be. And I think he's playing it the exact right way. He obviously knows more than he's willing to let on, but he's not interested in it, and rightly so. Just concentrate on getting us the points and moving us up the league.
Yeah, it's a bit of a shit sandwich for everyone at the club, to be honest, having a deadline day at the same time as you're trying to prepare for a game, because there could even be players in the squad on Monday who've had a day of people trying to unsettle them, random offers coming in, distracting them from the game. So I hope that isn't the case. Hope we're well prepared for it, but we will see how that all envelops. Anyways, after the break, we've got some actual clickbait shite, news, other bits to talk about. So we'll see where we go from here. We'll catch after the break. Welcome back to How Are the Podcast, Gav here. And as I said before the break, we've just been chatting about Régis Le Bris' pre-Burnley press conference. We never actually really mentioned any of the things he said about Burnley, so I guess I should probably quickly summarise that, because it can probably be summarised in about 20 seconds. But he talked about them just being pretty well organised, having the ability to frustrate you, but they're struggling at the minute. And yeah, that was really it. To be honest, he seemed pretty focused on us and not them. But looking at in a slightly different direction, Johnny, transfers now. We've not had many transfer links, and I'm not even sure if these are worth talking about, but we're going to. I don't know if you saw this one. Antonino Gallo from Lecce, who are a Serie A club. He's been linked to Sunderland by Peter O'Rourke. He's a left back, a 26-year-old first team regular over there, came through the youth system and has been pretty much an ever present ever since he arrived on the scene. Not someone I'm familiar with, but interesting because of the fact he's a left back. We'll come on to some of the outs this week in a bit, so I don't want to cover them off too much. But we have sold one of our backups, and then Dennis Cirkin's contract runs out in the summer, so could well be, couldn't it, that we have one eye on the future if we are going to do any business. And maybe a left back could be possible.
Well, I mean, like you say, it all depends on Cirkin, I think, really. If the club were... Well, I mean, firstly, we should say we've got no idea whether the club genuinely have any interest in this fella. Like, who knows? As you said, there's a fair amount of clickbait that's, swirling around the internet at this particular time of year. If there is genuine interest, then that would maybe signal that either the club don't think Cirkin will sign a new contract, or they think they can upgrade, essentially, because as they've proven with the business already this season, they're not going to be hanging around, and there's no room for sentiment. Dan Neil's just left, our promotion winning captain. So anyone's fair game if the club think that they can realistically improve on them, and if all the finances and everything like that makes sense. So if we do have genuine interest, it would maybe suggest that Cirkin's going to go. But personally, I think I've said this a few times, I'd rather just keep Cirkin. And I know there's loads of moving parts in the equation, and there's things that are out of either Cirkin's hands or the club's hands, and vice versa, depending on whose perspective you're coming at it from. I'd rather see Cirkin stay. I think he already loves the club. We all, as fans, I think, love or very much like Dennis Cirkin. Injury issues aside, which I know that's a big aside, but injury issues aside, he's done very well for us, and he's been part of, the best period in the club's recent history. How much would you be spending to replace him with a similar type of player in terms of quality, age profile? Oh, actually, no. Forget that I said age profile. I hate that phrase. I don't know why I just said it. His age. But, all those things that you add together and you think, how much would you have to spend to be guaranteed that you're going to get somebody who's better than him? That's an open question, but I don't know anything about this lad. I can't pretend that I'm a regular watcher of Lecce. They're not in my top. They're probably not even in my top 250 clubs that I'd watch if they were on telly. So I've not done a scouting report, but I think either way, whether we keep Cirkin or whether somebody comes in, whether it's this lad or somebody else, in the short term, it's not a huge deal because we all know Ronaldo's number one. So it's always going to be a conversation that's with a view to being a backup stroke, a younger option to develop and take the shirt in a few years. So we don't need to panic either way. It's not going to impact the sort of first 11 too much for the remainder of the season. So if it happens, then fair enough, and I hope he's a good player. But if not, oh well.
Yeah, that left-sided defence, Bomber, is interesting though, because this week we've allowed 2 left-sided defenders to leave the club. Of course, Arthur Masuaku, he went to Racing Lens over in the French top flight, and then on Thursday, Alese joined Portsmouth, and of course, neither men have been regular features this season. I think Alese just keeps getting injured at the wrong time, because if you think about the start of the season, if he'd been fit, or even him or Luke O'Neill had been fit, they would have probably started them first few games. And it was actually Jensen Seelt who came into the team, but he keeps getting injured at the wrong time, just needs to play some football. He's had a couple of under-21s games in the last couple of weeks, so he's gone out on loan. And like I said, Masuaku, who I think he's played 4 games for us, and that was when Ronaldo was banned mainly and didn't do particularly well. He's been allowed to leave. But we have let players go in that sort of area of the pitch, haven't we? So, and I was talking before about Leo Hjelde potentially being somebody that you might let leave as well, because he's not played a lot. So I don't think it's beyond the realms of possibility that we would bring in a defender who can maybe play centre-half and left-back. I don't know if this lad's the one, but it's just intriguing to me that we're being linked with somebody who plays on that side of the pitch, given the names who've gone out the door.
Yeah, it is interesting that we've been linked with a left-sided defender, because, and he is out and out a left-back. I don't think he's played. I've just been, whilst you've been talking, is scouring his transfer marked profile. Doesn't look like he's played centre-back at all, so he is an out-and-out left-back. So it is an interesting one, because it's an area that I think we absolutely don't need anybody in, even with Masuaku and Alese going, because Trey Hume is just as competent a left back as he is a right back. Really, it's some of the times that he's had to switch and play out there. So if you've already got Ronaldo, who, if he's fit and he's not suspended, he plays, and he probably plays 90 minutes every single week. On the off chance that he isn't fit, or that he's not, or that he is suspended, you've got Trey Hume or Dennis Serkin who can both slot in there, and the chances of both of them being unavailable and us being left with nobody to play left back, I think is very, very low. So if there is truth in it, I think it probably speaks more of the future of Dennis Serkin than it does about the futures of Alese or Masuaku, or our need for a left back. Don't even think it says anything about the short or mid-term future of Ronaldo. I think if we were to sign him, say if these rumours are true and we do end up signing him, I think it speaks more of Dennis Serkin's future and what that contract situation is more than anything else. But similar to Jonny and yourself, I'm sure, Gav, never heard of him before today and never seen him play. But anybody who's ever present in a Serie A side, regardless, can't be awful, I guess. But I'd be very surprised if he's another Ronaldo.
What are your thoughts, Jonny, on just quickly on Alese and Masuaku leaving? Expected, wasn't it, really?
Oh, yeah. That was just... It was a matter of when and where, not if, for those players, I think. It's a shame for Adji, like, because, you know, when he was first in the team a few years ago under Tony Mowbray, he was excellent. You know, he was excellent at left back. He was excellent at centre back. Even the start of last season, you know, again, I think we mentioned this on some of the summer pods, but you forget he started the season as first choice centre back, essentially. And
him and Luke O'Nien, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I think they didn't concede a goal as a centre back partnership as well. So, you know, he was and presumably still is a very good player, just obviously being ravaged by injuries, and he kept getting them at the worst possible times as well, didn't he? You know, he'd get in the team, he'd get on a run and he'd be playing well, and then he'd be out, and he'd be out at quite important points of the season as well, which I think, you know, it's a real shame the way it went, but, you know, he moves on with all of our best wishes, I'm sure, because he never really put a foot wrong in a Sunderland shirt. It just hasn't worked. Masuaku, obviously.
By the way, sorry, on that, on Adji, before you move on, that if he is fit, and it's a big if, of course, what a signing that is for Pompey, because they're battling down the bottom, and we're talking about a lad who was starting for us, as you just said, Jonny. So that's a great signing for them if they can keep him fit.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. If he can stay fit, and as long as he's not kind of lost too much of his game to the injury issues, then he's a far, far better footballer than where Pompey are on the table. That's without a shadow of a doubt. But it's interesting because I didn't really think about this, but Bomber, when you and Bomber would just talk about the idea of like a centre-back stroke left-back kind of player maybe coming in, potentially that would make sense even if we do still keep Serkin and he signs a new contract, because no Masuaku, Alese is not really an option, but he's now gone as well. With our sort of eagerness to move to a back three or back five sometimes, depending on how you like to think about it, there's not a massive amount of cover behind Alderete as the sort of left-sided centre-back of the three. Mm-hmm. And, you know, and we've seen with Nordy as well, where we sometimes play that, where that kind of wide centre-back can essentially flip between full-back and centre-back, and it's quite adaptable. If we were to sign slightly more of a utility player as a left-sided defender, there probably is a place in the squad for them, even with the players we've already got. So could be one to keep an eye on, actually.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. We'll see what happens with that position. But yeah, I think I'm talking myself into it, actually. But if you've got to think as well, though, if we let any more players go, like if Yelda does go, you're right, we don't really have another player on that side, and we can move people about, but ideally you want a left-footed centre-half to play left centre-half. You know what I mean? So we'll see what happens. But yeah, nice to see our name being linked with somebody, at least, even if it may well be a load of shit. The other name which is out there is that of Moussa Diaby, formerly of Aston Villa, now playing in the Saudi leagues. And Graham Bailey from Team Talk has said that Sunderland were offered Diaby by intermediaries, but they've decided, or his party have decided not to pursue a move anywhere other than Inter Milan. So whether we were even interested or not is one thing, but pretty sure he's a right winger. So that's interesting. Again, we're talking about the right side of midfield. Pretty tenuous link with Jonny, isn't it, really? Moussa Diaby. Don't know whether there's any truth in it, but you can kind of see where that one's going in terms of a player who plays on the wing. That's what we're maybe, if we are looking up the pitch, that's maybe what we're looking at.
Yeah, it's an interesting link, isn't it? I think, you know, we've all spoken about this numerous times in the group chats. People talk about it on social media. We've talked about it on here. I think the consensus is that we do need another option in that area of the pitch. It was an area that the club were clearly looking to address in the summer in a big way. You know, we had that move for Armand Loriente, which ended up not happening. You know, we signed Traore on deadline day. We brought in Talby. We brought in Adingra. So those wide areas have been something that the club have, you know, obviously have identified as a massively important area of the pitch. So with the way that the season's gone and maybe the performances of certain players, not to dig people out, but it's not been a sea of creativity and goals out wide. So I think there's room for somebody to come in, whether that's one of the players who's already in the squad or whether that is somebody from outside who we sign. There's room for somebody to come in and really stake a claim to make one of those positions their own. And with the way that Talby, I think, especially, has performed when he's moved over to the left, the right wing seems the obvious slot. And Bertrand Traore obviously on a short-term contract and not getting any younger. So I wouldn't be surprised at all to see somebody come in, but I would potentially question the legitimacy of a link where it involves Sunderland just being offered a player by intermediaries, because I would suspect that the operation we've got going on behind the scenes in the recruitment department is a touch more in-depth than sit by the phone and wait to see if some agents ring you up and offer you a player who the club doesn't want. So yeah, I'd take that particular player's name with a couple of handfuls of salt, I reckon. But the position and the idea of us being interested in players there, I think that, you know, makes complete sense.
Yes, indeed. Just very quickly as well, before we move on from players and stuff, don't know if you saw this, but it looks like Tommy Watson's going to Millwall on loan, which is interesting because, they're pushing to get promoted, potentially looking at signing Anthony Patterson if rumours are to be believed, which could see them link back up. But yeah, I mean, already being moved on slightly by Brighton to maybe go out and get games. So interesting for us. Maybe that somebody who we got an awful lot of money for, a competitor in the Premier League, haven't really given him any chances, and it looks like he's going to be farmed out on loan. So we'll see how that one goes for him. And just quickly before we disappear, I don't know if either of you lads saw this on Thursday night, but the under-18s, they muscled their way through in the FA Youth Cup against West Brom. It was a ridiculous game. Sunderland leading 2-0. West Brom got a penalty and got themselves level, and Sunderland had 2 men sent off and then were given another penalty in extra time. It ends up going to penalties, and then West Brom missed 2 spot kicks and Sunderland go through to the next round. So a dramatic game that might be on YouTube. I don't know, but I did watch it live on YouTube. But great result for the under-18, so well done to them. Well, that just leaves me with nothing else to say today because there's no more news. Hopefully between now and Monday, we might be back with an update pod or something to chat about who Sunderland are going to sign. Knowing how I look, Jonny and Bomber, it'll probably be dead in the water, this pod. Like an hour after we finish recording, Sunderland will probably sign someone, which is normally the case.
Yeah, we'll get a Fabrizio Here We Go about 30 seconds after we stop the recording, do you think?
Yeah.
Yeah, quite possibly. But thank you very much, lads. Been a pleasure as always.
Cheers, Gav.
No, pleasure was all mine.
Yeah, no problem at all. Thank you to the listeners. Of course, you joined us today on Saturday. Yesterday, we had the opposition preview with Joe Red from Turfcast, and he gave us the perspective of a Burnley fan who is pretty sick of his life at the minute watching his team. He sounded resigned to just going down. So that fills me with loads of dread ahead of Monday. But if you want to catch up on what he had to say, make sure you do that. Of course, coming up over the weekend, we've got a little special pod that we recorded, Jonny, with Chris, which was our Room 101 transfer window special. That was a good laugh, actually, wasn't it? Where we got to basically vent our spleens about some of the things we hate about transfer windows.
Yeah, and essentially a callback to that episode in this episode, but it's actually a call forward if this comes out before the Room 101. But the sheer venom with which he said clickbait shite, I think, tells its own story.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. So, yes, that will be out over the weekend. Thank you very much, everybody, for listening. Thank you to the boys. We'll be back with a match day preview on Monday and then reaction pods, review pods, all that other good stuff. So thank you very much, everyone. We'll catch you on the next one.